he's worried that you're actually taking this out on something.
Told you it disappeared.
Here we go. Well, play calling's always been a big part of the conversation in the NFL, but help may be on the way with the Zeus software program. Why do you see this?
Hey, man, this game ain't nothing but a fight. Make them throw the ball on the perimeter today.
We're going to smash they going to face it if they want to run that ball.
You know, I think the NFL is a big business. Certainly today's game is much different than it was 100 years ago. I think change is a part of our game, and new ideas come into play.
No one likes to leave any stone unturned because everyone wants to keep up.
We're all looking to gain that competitive edge as coaches, and I think the computers have a way of sometimes breaking down certain elements that can give you a chance to anticipate what's going to take place next.
Hoping to aid coaches in this quest are astrophysicist Chuck Bauer and theory statistician Frank Frigo. Together, they have created a software program called Zeus, which inputs facts and theory and pits them against each other on the battlefield of the mind.
We had seen revolutions in terms of game theory in other games, particularly backgammon and chess, where the games have completely evolved to a level in a virtual environment that it can play better than any human. There were a lot of similarities between what we were observing in football and what had occurred in some of these other games.
This method of simulation, one of the major names for it is called the Monte Carlo simulation. Physicists were among the first users of the modern digital computer for this very reason.
Zeus was designed to be able to play the game in a virtual environment. It's a very specific simulation engine that helps steer a coach in a critical and very difficult decision down the correct path.
To put things in perspective, there's a 16-game season, so if you average 6% cost by bad play calling every game for the whole season, that's in effect 1 game per season. Very significant in a 16-game NFL season.
Come on, boys, rally.
Sunday, November 2nd, there was a game between New England and Indianapolis, and in a really critical juncture of the game with New England trailing by 3 points, they had a 4th and 1 on the Indianapolis 7-yard line. And just as they were about to snap the ball, Belichick had second thoughts and went running on the field, waving his hands to call a timeout. You could ask the two teams to line up on the field in this given situation and play it to conclusion thousands of times. That's obviously physically impossible to do. So that leads us up to Zeus. Zeus is able to recreate this situation in a virtual environment and then play it literally hundreds of thousands of times. According to the simulation, the run is the optimum choice by nearly 7% game-winning chance.
The Pats would opt for the field goal. The Colts would win by 3 points, numbers that would debate Belichick's decision and back up Zeus's proposed blueprint. But for those who live this game, facing the odds is what makes it so real.
We're not playing Star Wars right now in football. I mean, you want to do that, go to Madden and play your video games. It's still a game that's played on the field. It's played by real people, called by real people. There's nothing a computer can tell you by looking at a feel of the game. Who's been dominating the line of scrimmage? Where is the momentum? The momentum is not going to be felt by a computer printout.
Our response to that is always, we don't disagree that there is momentum in the game, but we think you're probably overstating it a bit. What Zeus does, which really locks down its recommendation, is it performs a sensitivity analysis. We try to construct the strongest argument against its own recommendations. And what we found out, which is really amazing, is that in a lot of these situations, when we construct an argument against Zeus's recommendation, it doesn't necessarily overturn the decision.
The advantage of Zeus is through instant recommendation, but current NFL rules prohibit computers in play calling on game day. However, that may not be the inventor's biggest hurdle.
We had some time back a conversation with Marvin Lewis, and I think he was just brutally honest with us at the time that, you know, your model may well be right in some situations that coaches are too conservative, but I'm the one that has to answer the media on Monday morning. I'm the one that has to answer the fans. I'm the one that has to answer the owner. And I respect that argument. And what it makes you realize is that the risk profile is not necessarily perfectly aligned between winning the game and, I guess you'd say, job preservation.
Bauer and Frigo have presented at the NFL Combine and met with more than a dozen NFL teams on repeated occasions. They have the ear of many in the NFL, but will they get the call?
When I was at the Oakland Raiders, certainly we listened to the presentation, and these guys showed their ability to help you, and I think that piqued some people's interest, and then people decided to look more into it.
Our first presentation was in St. Louis when we were with the Rams, and they presented to us as a coaching staff. I think there's a group that is probably more in tune or more willing to listen than others, but we all do statistical analysis. And this is just, to me, just a really different way of coming at those analyses, and it's pretty powerful.
They're leaving a lot on the table, and it's something that is correctable. I mean, using Zeus, whether it's as a tutorial or if they had the ability to use it as a live feature during the game, it would make a tremendous difference. I mean, the difference between being 9-7 and 10-6, they'll spend a lot of money and look at a lot of different ways to improve, and here's one that's just staring them in the face.
You know, I think that most anyone would agree that was a fascinating, unique look inside the numbers of football. Now, the Zeus program does raise an interesting question. Can a computer call a game better than a coach? And I look at Chris because I've seen you use virtually every piece of technology there is in preparing for football games. So your thoughts are?
I would spend my own money to get that thing.
$100,000 is what it costs.
Oh, well, I'd spend Phil's money.
Okay.
But, you know, I think that as a head coach, obviously can't use it during the course of the game. But I would buy it, and I would, in the off-season, go through every one of our games that we played and check every situation, sort of like the Jeff Fisher thing. You know, do you kick the field goal there? Do you go for it on 4th down? And make sure that my decision-making was such that it sort of matches up with a computer. Now, if it's a 52-48 kind of a deal, well, big deal. But if I've made some decisions that only had a 40% likelihood of being successful, I want to know that for future decision making, I would absolutely use a program like this.
For a guy who's lived and breathed and has eaten football, any use of Zeus by you?
You know, just my first thought is, and I'll just try to boil it down to this, I hate it. And, you know, I just do. You know, because if we went by this, first off, they do all these analysis in the NFL. They got every number in the world you could look up. It's at our disposal. And thank God I never played for a coach who relied on such, you know, numbers and that to make a decision.
But we would have never, that's what I get the play sheet
we would have never
saying,
won a Super Bowl because Bill Parcells gambled, and the statistics would have said, don't do it, coach, it'll backfire. But it didn't.
Bill Parcells gambled not the majority of the time, maybe in certain situations.
He was a huge gambler in big moments to win games. And that computer would not kick that out and say that. And how's the computer going to take in weather conditions?
Well, hold on, Jeff Fisher. Jeff Fisher.
I know.
Was that a big situation with Jeff Fisher when he decided to go for it?
Yes, I know.
That was a big situation. And the computer agreed with Jeff Fisher, saying essentially that going for the field goal was only 1% more of the game. So it agreed with Jeff Fisher.
Well, I'm sure Coach Fisher is really relieved over that. So, but, you know, weather conditions, injuries, all the other things you take into account, the human element, how does your quarterback feel? He's not very confident, but the computer says, stick it in there. You know, so it doesn't make sense to me.
What do you think?
If you've ever tried to beat a chess game on the computer, it's impossible because they can run millions of situations in exactly that setup as to what you should do next. And no mind, no matter how experienced it is, will at least give you the percentages of that. And I want to know those percentages. I may beat Bill Parcells. I may decide at this moment in the game I'm going for it, but I want to know what the percentages of that computer are.
Last real quick, I'm going to tell a real quick story. Playing Dallas, 1984. Ernie Stautner, defensive coordinator, he's aggressive. They're bringing a double safety blitz. I know it's coming. We call a play, we block it up, we go for 20 yards. We send the exact same play in again. I go, stupidest call in the world. We run the play, they double safety blitz, another 20-yard gain. I said to Coach Parcells when the game was over, why did you do that? He goes, I knew that guy over there was going to be so mad that we hit the first one that he'd do it again. Now, what was the computer going to say to that?
Do you have a DVR?
Yes.
You know how to turn it on?
I do.
You play video games?
No.
Do you know how to play them? Hate them?
Hate them.
What about computers? You use
computers? Have one. I actually have a computer in my car. I'm going to use it on the way home today.
You will?
I swear. Know how to get on it, know how to log on. I email. I'm not completely out of touch with everything. Okay. I just believe in the human element.
Won't argue with you. Folks, our next call is to head back to the highlights and a trio of games that all went down to the last play. In fact, the very last kick, beginning with Seattle at St. Louis.